and in those 11, no, in those 13, they're in 2 different quadrants.
Okay.
So they all in those quadrants kind of have their same kind of need. For example, I have a Glencliff quadrant, so typically their quadrant has a little bit higher EL needs. Special ed, it's not necessarily as high. Their discipline may not be as high, but they definitely have the reading and language, kind of needs. My Antioch one has a little higher special ed population. The socioeconomic issue is probably the same for both. It just looks different for both.
Right.
And so what their needs, and the discipline is a little bit different for Antioch than it would be for Glencliff. So thinking about those needs, the funding is going to be different for, the funding's not going to be, but resources might be different for those schools. For example, Glencliff schools need more EL teachers in their schools than would as many Antioch schools, although Antioch has EL as well.
Right.
So it really just depends on the need of the school, and they're all kind of different, but they have very similar characteristics that we talk about.
So when you think about sort of like of the 15 schools.
Yeah, let's do 13.
Okay, 13.
Charters is different for them.
So when you think about sort of those 13 school leaders that you work with, and if you could think about the one that's been most successful at allocating dollars within their budget and using dollars to get the best return on investment, the best ROI, what has that principal done and what has made them successful? If there's one that you think has
there's one, I have one that gets it. He really gets the process. He gets how to align his funding to his needs. His funding is just different because his school is smaller.
Yeah.
And so, when I think about like the big return on investment, you don't get as much, but he understands, for example, his school has a definite behavior need, and so they got a behavior specialist, or he purchased a behavior specialist position because his data said that I have a lot of discipline needs, but what he did was drill down to see what kind of discipline that actually is, and then did a lot of training with his staff to understand that kind of discipline. They also utilized data coaches. I mean, he's really strategic in his thinking and what his kids, what his staff, and what his community really needs. So he definitely gets if there's anybody out of those, and a couple of my principals are new, so I'm still trying to kind of figure it out.
Right.
Like with their, and they get it too. But this one in particular really gets the SBB process. Definitely gets, aligning his funds, whatever dollars those are, definitely gets aligning that funding, aligning it to his data, aligning it to the needs of his school.
And if you kind of think, if he's your most successful principal, if you think about sort of your least successful principal when it comes to just the SBB work, what gaps do you see in that person's decision making or practice around this?
Yeah.
And what do you think that person needs to be more successful?
So that particular person, I think part of it is SBB, that, if I have more money, then I can do, this, and I can purchase a lot of stuff for my teachers. So I feel like part of the SBB process that you don't get to measure is the human side of what principals feel they need to do for their teachers.
Right.
And so if you give a principal, $30,000, you would think that you would align it to my data, but then some of them say, if I invest in my teachers, they're going to really be more apt to be in the building and give us from 90 to 100% more, depending. So if some of them think if I buy things for my teachers, then that in turn will make them happy. That in turn will make them succeed more in the classroom. And,
So when you say spending money on teachers or investing in them, what does that look like?
So some will buy a classroom set full of stuff. If they need a whiteboard, if they need, instructional supplies, if they just say, if I give you all this stuff to start off with, then you should be, grateful because I give you this stuff versus you having to purchase it if you having to actually